terrorism in Iraq has grown exponentially. Although Saddam was overthrown and people are happy about his departure, the pain and suffering of the Iraqi people has persisted and has even been aggravated. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, Iranian president.
Welcome back to Inside Iraq. On the 6th anniversary on the fall of Baghdad, we are discussing the lessons and consequences of the war on Iraq with Hans Blix, Claire Short, and Adam Early. Adam, except perhaps for a very small number of people worldwide, everybody thinks that the 2003 war on Iraq was illegal. Perhaps as an official of the State Department, you disagree with that categorization.
Well, you know, I'm an official of the State Department. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really offer, I'm not in a position to offer you a legal opinion. What I would say is that there are very fine legal minds that come down on both sides of that question. There are fine legal minds in the United States and around the world who say it's legal. There are fine legal minds who say it's not legal. So I'll leave it to the lawyers and the historians to argue that for the next couple of centuries. What I would say is our focus is on looking ahead and on making Iraq a secure, stable, prosperous country that is a force for good in the region, and we've come a long way towards that goal.
I can't help it but to have to draw a comment from a lawyer on this show. Hans Blix, go ahead.
Well, it's true that every State Department or Foreign Ministry can find a lawyer who defends what they have done, and they usually do that. But I have no doubt that about 90% of the world's international lawyers would agree with Claire Short and myself that the war was illegal and was a breach of the UN Charter. But I had a couple of other points. I agree with what Claire Short said a while ago, and all her points, actually. But with you, you brought up some important points in your introduction, and let me comment on two of them. One was about the impotence of the UN. I mean, it's often taken that the UN was ignored by the US. That is true. But I think in a way one could say that there was a victory of the UN that they did not endorse the war. The US and the UK went to the Security Council and wanted an endorsement and a permission to go into Iraq. And I think it was a victory for the UN system that they did not endorse a war that was illegal and that should not have taken place. Coming up on what you said, which I think is very important, is that the war showed the limitations of military power. I think throughout the 90s we saw, and especially during the Bush regime, we saw a sort of exuberant belief, exaggerated belief in the military power, that you could settle things by military power. And the Iraq war was the first great stop of that they really failed. And then came the Israeli invasion of Lebanon as a response to the incursions by the Hezbollah. But that also proved a negative and was not successful. I think Gaza is another experience, and the US threats, with all options being on the table with regard to Iran and North Korea, has also shown that no, they cannot really use military power. I think it's a great blessing that the Obama administration is now turning their eyes to diplomacy and to negotiations and realizing that there are severe limitations of what you can do with military means.
Claire Short, the renouncement and the repudiation of the war by Barack Obama, and perhaps he distanced the United States completely from this war. Would he have taken that position if the war turned out completely different? If 2003 Saddam was decapitated, the Iraqi army just surrendered, and Iraq overnight turned to democracy, would we be sitting here 6 years after discussing this about this war, whether it's legal or illegal? Is it the consequences of that war that is generating all this discussion?
Well, I think certainly if everything had been perfect and wonderful in Iraq, even if it wasn't legal, that would be a historical and legal point, but people wouldn't focus much on it if the people of Iraq were much better off. But my own view is that the chaos and suffering flowed from the illegality and the deceit. And that, as I've said before, if the motive had been really to get rid of Saddam Hussein, to enable the people of Iraq to displace him, to build their own country, to help them, it could have been done in a very different way, and then it would have both been legal and the situation would have been better. But for Obama, maybe if it had all gone perfectly, he wouldn't be president, in that one of the reasons he was admired in his country is that he was right about it. He said this was wrong, and then the country found out that he was right and the Bush administration had been wrong.
Adam Early, the ace in the cards for whether President Bush or for the US in general regarding this war is that Iraq somehow, 6 years after the war, is completely different than during 35 years of Saddam Hussein, i.e. there is a semblance of democracy. There is a smooth and peaceful transition of power from Allawi to Ja'fari to a Maliki, and perhaps in the December election something will happen. There is a parliament, and there is a vibrant press in Iraq. You read it all the time. And yet there is a deep-rooted malaise in this wonderful picture, and that is sectarianism. The constitution is challenged by everybody, and this whole facade might just crumble down as the Americans start leaving next year.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a kind of historical comparison that we sometimes use here at the American Embassy, and if you date Iraq's founding to 1920, well, if you date Iraq's founding to 1921, which was the establishment of the monarchy and an independent state, and you go forward 87 years, you're at 2008, in other words, the end of last year. If you go to the founding of the United States, which is 1776, and you go forward 87 years, you are at the day after the Battle of Gettysburg. So it just shows you how long it took the United States to develop, and 87 years after our founding, we were in the middle of a civil war. 87 years after Iraq's founding, they've got a vibrant democracy. But the point here is that the modern history of Iraq is just being written. And so I'm a little reluctant to offer you prescriptions or predictions. What I can say is, what's the reality right now? And I think that was summed up very well by Prime Minister Maliki in Doha last week when he spoke to the Arab League summit, and he said, look, we've got a constitution, we've got freedom of speech, we've got freedom of the press, we have widespread political participation, and we're focusing on reconciliation. Are they out of the woods yet? By no means. Are they on the right path? Absolutely. And the important point here is that more and more, every day, the future of Iraq is in Iraqi hands and nobody else, and that's where it should be.
Hans Blix, listening to Adam as if he is proposing the idea that Iraqis, they have to wait another 87 years until they become good Democrats. And yet, I remember on the eve of the war, everybody from the Bush administration was saying that Iraq is going to turn into democracy overnight. What's your comment?
Well, I think we will take joy in the evolution that seems to be taking place now, and we hope that the Iraqis owning the situation will also instill in them the responsibility to cooperate. I mean, the alternative to have a foreign occupying power for how long? For ages. I don't think that's possible. And if the US is worried about weapons of mass destruction, how can you guarantee forever that they will not come back? I mean, I think it's right that the US is leaving, and I'm glad that Obama has put a period to it. The belief that you can establish democracies in foreign countries by intervention and by regime change is one that I think is fading. And one of the problems we have seen are in Iran today. The CIA instigated the coup against Mossadegh in 1953. And that led eventually to the regime that you have. And I think that any attempts from the outside subversively to replace that is unwise and illegal in addition.
I'm in the last few minutes left to me, Claire Short. Blair called this war a disaster. I'm going to ask you to go on a limb. Knowing what we know, and I would like you to put yourself in the shoes of President Bush, do you think either Bush or Blair would have ventured into this venture had they known what the outcome would be?
No, I think they were arrogant. It was full of hubris. America can do what it likes. And because Saddam Hussein was such an awful leader, America thought it would be welcomed by the Iraqi people and therefore able to place itself in Iraq and be more dominant in the Gulf. I don't think they expected what they got. They didn't listen to much advice, and it's the Iraqi people who've paid the price. And I just want to say they've got worse conditions economically than they had even before the war. But their move against sectarianism in recent elections gives me cause for hope that the people of Iraq, despite everything that's happened and the feeding of sectarianism, are building back the sense of a country where all the different people respect each other and live side by side. And I really hope they can achieve that.
On that happy and hopeful note, Claire Short, I'm going to ask 30 seconds comment from each of one of you. I'm going to start with Adam, Hans Blix, and I will close with Claire Short. Go ahead, Adam.
The only comment I have is that, you know, I would share everybody's assessment that things could have been done better and mistakes were made. We've taken the sort of rear view mirrors off the bus and are looking forward and are trying to make Iraq, as I said, a better place than it's ever been. And the great news is that we've got really strong and capable Iraqi partners in that endeavor.
Hans Blix?
Well, I think the Iraqi people has paid a terrible price to get rid of a horrible dictator. I think again today is that it's realized that militarism has very severe restrictions, and I think we take joy in the statement by Medvedev and Obama in London that they are looking forward to really accept the end of the Cold War and moving into a period of disarmament and less military use.
Claire Short, before you have your final comment, if President Bush is before you, what would you tell him?
Well, what is there to say? It's too late. He committed war crimes. He destroyed many people's lives. He's a profoundly dishonourable man. He'd better pray to his God for forgiveness.
Claire Short, Hans Blix, Adam Early, thank you for being guests on Inside Iraq. To access the show and to send us your comments, please go to aljazeera.net/English. We have reached the end of this show. Join me next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Until then, have a great week.